Hey everyone, it's November 19th, 2017, and this is your episode 121 of Percussion. I'm your host, Casey Cangelosi, and with me, as usual, are Laurel Black
Hi.
and Megan Arns.
Hello.
Ben Charles is away. He's doing something with his wind ensemble or something. It sounds like he had to fill in for a play or something like that. So, hey Ben, I hope you're listening. And you guys, our guest today is the Director of Percussion Studies at the University of North Carolina, Greensboro, and currently serves as chair of the International Percussion Ensemble Committee and vice president for the North Carolina chapter of the Percussive Arts Society. He performs all over the place. He's performed at PASIC conventions something like 8 separate times. And yeah, there's so much to say about Mr. Eric Willie. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Gus. Thanks for having me.
So I understand you just got back from the Moscow Drum Fest, is that right?
That's correct. It's been a little over a week now, and there's a father-son duo that runs the competition, and I had a great time. It's the first time I'd been to Russia, and yeah, so I judged for snare drum, marimba, vibraphone, and also a drum set.
Wow.
And yeah, I wasn't sure why they put me in the drum set portion. I love playing drum set, but I wouldn't say I'm recognized as a solo drum set artist. It was a very unique experience. Got to meet the principals of Moscow Symphony, and it was fun to talk to them about their interpretation on some of our standard excerpts and whatnot. And it was great to see the city. So overall, it was great. Wonderful
Were there a
experience.
lot of participants, a lot of competitors?
Yes. I'm guessing probably around 100. It was quite large.
Mostly
Yeah.
Russian or international?
Mostly Russian. There
That's
were,
awesome.
I believe there were some from Serbia. They were also there. They were all close by.
Did you have some good food?
Had a lot of soup.
A lot of soup.
A lot
Okay.
of soup. Yes, a lot of soup. But
Any particular kinds of soup?
I don't know. I do not speak Russian. And I was very fortunate. The first 4 days, Nebojsa Zivkovic was there, and so he was able to interpret for me. And he was there with 2 of his children, and that helped a ton. But as far as the food that they were feeding me, it was great. I didn't ask questions. So
I find that
Awesome.
judging some of these international competitions, I come back and students are always very curious to know, so how is it different over there? How is the competition run over there? And for the most part, I say, well, there's some subtle differences, and pretty much the way the rules work is basically the same. And the only new piece of information I have to share is maybe how the other judges were, or some of the things they look for, or some of the things they might have cared about that I didn't, or vice versa. Any information like that come to mind that you think like different opinions over there?
most definitely. And this was the highlight of that pinnacle of that discussion was in snare drum performance.
Mm-hmm.
And while we had 2 very different opinions, we could discuss about sound, performance aspects. And I did my clinic on the next to last day on Thursday. And originally I was going to do just talking about snare drum musicality. But I ended up changing it because everybody played a Pratt solo as part of their competition. And it was very interesting as an American growing up in drum corps and WGI, and I spent a lot of time with this music and hearing somebody from another continent play this. It was very unique, and our thoughts on it sometimes differed, but we did respect each other. Some people would flow on time on Pratt, and some people were very musical rather than just keeping strict time and muting of the drums, all those kind of things. But it was the things that we had discussions as far as differences were really just musical interpretation. Everybody played really well.
Yeah. I noticed that every time I've judged the snare drum competition in Italy, the Italy PAS, I've noticed there is a huge difference in the opinion of mute the head or not. Like so many folks play it just totally open. And one of my first comments is, considering the room we were in, was, man, I can't hear what you're playing. Like, I need you to dry it up. I can't. Like, none of this is clear. Like, these fast licks sound like buzz rolls, and but
Right.
yeah, that's tough though, because that's kind of something they're, I guess, told to go for.
Yeah, most definitely. And just simply like playing areas, I usually tell my guys to play Pratt in the center of the head, just like we would with a marching drum, so I can hear the articulation of all the rolls. And that wasn't the case,
Yeah.
for most of the performers. And the thing I really appreciated for it is there was one student in particular. They had varying age groups, by the way, too. So it was 9, 10, 11 to 13, 13 to 16, and they kept going up. In the drum set competition, it actually went up to 28 years old. As a side note, there was actually a 9-year-old kid that came up and played Take 5 and like almost beat everybody. It was amazing. Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
He was smoking. But in the snare drum round, there was a student that came up. I don't remember his first piece, but I think he played Drum Corps and Parade for a second. Didn't miss a thing. Great time, great dynamics. He didn't move at all. Like, there was no performance etiquette. And he didn't pass. And, for me, I did have him high up, but for the rest of the committee, it was like, this guy isn't a performer. This guy plays well, but he's not a performer.
Uh-huh.
And there was very much a status difference of like playing well and then being a soloist. So, and it was very unique.
Was most of the panel Russian, or was it was all international people?
No, they were all Russian. Most
All
of them
Russian,
from
okay.
Moscow.
That's
Yeah.
so interesting. Wow. Yeah. I guess I have a question for you guys who judge a lot. I'm always curious how much discussion there is on a panel, like during the competition. How much are you trying to get on the same page, or are you ever on panels where people like don't want to talk and they just want to do their kind of individual? How important do you think it is that a panel is kind of on the same page and in the same number range or whatever?
For me, I've done it both ways, and it kind of usually depends on the vibe of the committee. I found that the judging committee, they end up deciding that unless the moderator states that. So, for example, one of the competitions at PASIC, I know that the 3 judges did not talk at all. And so, one person's score, I think for one group was like 30 points different than the other 2, and so.
I heard about all this, yes.
We did hear about
So-
that.
We hung with
Yeah.
one of the judges.
So, but you can respect their opinion for holding their ground and having a strong opinion for what they want. But as far as the committee or everything, I found that the committee kind of dictates that. That's what I found, at least in my experience.
Yeah, sure. I've liked talking because sometimes I do need help. It is okay, you have to give a ranking and you have to give an order. But in fact, it happened, Megan and I judged together at PAS, and I had a reason to put the group that got first and the group that got second on the same level. And it really helped to hear Megan's opinion and Chris White's opinion, just like what they saw. It's like, oh, good, thank you. That helps me like make a decision. Because really, in my own mind, I can see them being at the same spot. So then seeing, I don't know, other input is really helpful. And on one hand, it seems like, well, that is what discussion should be for. It should be this thing that assists in finding the best person. But then, it could be a little tricky because I don't know, some people just don't want to talk, or they're not good at talking, and they end up getting combative or something. Right. And that's the risk, I suppose. Yeah. Well, I think we should talk about PASIC a little bit, because this podcast is going to come out quite a bit after PASIC, about 2 weeks after PASIC. But Megan and I judged together, and it was for.
That was fun.
Yeah, that was way fun. And it was for a contest that Dr. Willie put together. So as the chair of this chamber percussion ensemble competition, can you tell us just a little about how that works and what you do for that?
Yes. This started, I believe this is year 4. I believe it's 4 of this. And this happened really quick when I became chair of the committee. and it was something that was a carryover from Andy Spencer and Dan Moore. They had been kind of pushing for this to happen. It just hadn't happened yet, and it just happened to be approved once I came in there. The competition, I believe this year we did up to 8 or 10 in each category. I can't remember right now. And it's typically been held in conjunction with the marching competition, so that the setup is very similar and everything flows just like the marching competition. But there's 2 categories. There's 2 sets of judges, and I get to pick the judges. I get to invite people like you two. I was very lucky to have both of you on that committee along with Chris White. So, and what was also great is this year is that you guys weren't in like a warehouse, is that you were in a normal room so you could actually hear.
I could hear well.
Yeah, I had heard that was one of the problems in the past, was the space. And I thought it was definitely better than what had been described.
It's probably been tough. You've gotten tons of emails saying you just chose Megan and Casey because you wanted a spot on the podcast. That's right. I imagine just tons of emails.
So much controversy.
Right. A lot of tension there, most definitely.
Oh, I was gonna change the subject for a moment because I watched Brian Zader's, the president of PIS. He put out the video and asked people to watch this video before PASIC, and he said that a lot of the competitions were going to be suspended for next year. How does that affect your committee and this competition?
We're fortunate with the Percussion Ensemble Committee that everything is staying. Like the International Percussion Ensemble Committee, competition rather, and the Chamber Percussion Ensemble competition are staying. As far as the number of slots and things like that, I think that's a variable that may change. But no, we're lucky on that end. And I think those competitions have been, kind of the green jacket if you get one of those spots, that they're kind of an honored spot. And so I think they're going to keep those, and I'm really glad that that's going to happen.
I had one more thought about numbers and judging and do you talk or not. I know Laurel saw me judge a competition once where she and I were just so certain who the first place winner was. And everyone was really good, but this person we thought really just stood out above and beyond. And Laurel was just in the audience. She came up to me afterwards and said, "Oh, well, great, this will be easy for you guys." And I said, "Oh yeah, for sure. This is just hands down very, very clear." And the other judges just didn't agree. So everyone had kind of a different first place winner. And then the number gaps were just large enough that who ends up in first place is everyone's second or third, and sometimes that can be even lower. So yeah, if you're not really careful with the numbers or if you exaggerate your opinion too much on the scores, then the person who ends up winning is everyone's third place,
right?
Because it's basically the average of the number discrepancy. So it's really weird. It's like, well, yeah, we ended up with this kind of no one's first place won. So I've seen that happen several times, and I guess we should congratulate, at least on our competition, Megan and I's competition. All the judges, we were all in agreement, and we totally talked openly about it, and it was very, very clear. But we need to congratulate Micah Detweiler. He's been on the podcast before. Yeah, his high school group won. So yeah, way to go, Micah.
Yay!
Well, I hope some of the people listening who might be thinking about competitions, I know we've talked about them so many times, but it just drives the point home. Like, it doesn't necessarily, you could have done better than you thought. You just didn't win, that kind of stuff.
Right.
If you're a competitor, I think it's important to hear that over and over again.
Yeah, right. Absolutely. And I guess a question for Megan and Eric, you all have such a marching background. I know the way they judge marching competitions is very different than how we judge these solo competitions. Do you guys think there's, I don't know, something that solo competitions need to learn from marching competitions or vice versa?
I think judging the marching competition, the thing that helps is learning numbers management, like you said. I think that's helped me, and the things that you are listening for as far as from a broad vantage point.
Yeah, anything come to mind, Megan?
Not really. I thought it was easier to judge. I think it's easier to judge solo or chamber music, and I don't know why. Maybe it's just because it's more of a broad variety. Sometimes in the marching, I think I don't know, it gets kind of tedious.
Hmm.
You're looking for the same things over and over, and it's not less creative, but I don't know. Also, maybe I do have a lot of a background in marching, but I do way less of that now. So maybe just because I'm doing so much solo and chamber stuff, it's easier for me to judge it because I'm constantly around it, and I'm not
Right.
as involved in the marching activity anymore. So and it's changing so rapidly that it's hard to keep up with it, And
Yes.
so in a way, I feel less qualified because it's changing so quickly. And I definitely, chamber and solo is definitely changing too, but it's still inherently about the music and the performance that it's easier for me to adjudicate that, I guess.
Right. And
Yeah.
they're both percussion performance aspects, but they're very different art forms, in my
Yes.
opinion.
Have you ever done any DCI or WGI judging, Eric? I know, and also, you are still involved in the DCI activity, correct?
I am. I'm very little, but I'm fortunate to teach with the Cavaliers, and I do about a week or 2 weeks in the summer. I'm the filler guy that gets to come in.
That's cool. You get to stay involved, but not have to do
Right.
the
I don't have to
massive
do
amounts of.
the everyday rehearsals. That's the biggest thing, is the first 3 weeks or month that I don't have to do that. Unfortunately, right now. But it is. And this last summer I went out, and it was the first time I taught with Phantom Regiment in 13, and so it'd been 4 years since I'd been in the activity, and it was very different. And the caliber level of these players was much higher than I expected. So, for example, in the marimba line alone, there were 2 performance majors from Indiana University, one from Oklahoma. So that I could really talk to them about touch and musical concepts, and not just timing and playing together. So it was very interesting to speak more musically than just playing together. That was it.
Yeah, sure. Megan, you were on a panel this time at PASIC, and I think it relates to something Eric gets asked a lot about. I think you were on 2 panels actually, but one was about
Yeah.
curriculum and
Mhm.
what we should be teaching and what you all are teaching. Can you tell us a little about that?
Yeah, sure. So it was the University Pedagogy Committee, and they put together a panel discussion about the ideal collegiate percussion curriculum, and is there really one? And we definitely decided as a panel very early on that there is not an ideal curriculum, and that everyone goes about it differently based on your background, your student's background, the university, the way the School of Music or Department of Music is set up. But we had a really awesome conversation about it. And it was James Campbell from University of Kentucky, Andy Bliss from University of Tennessee, and myself. And so I think all 3 of us are at very different stages in our careers. So that kind of added to the richness of the discussion. And yeah, there were handouts, and everyone kind of approached it differently. But I think one thing that I really came away still pondering after the discussion was the idea of the 1 hour a week, 1 hour, 1 week lesson. And is that always the most effective method? And Jonathan Oval had some interesting things from the audience that he brought up, and we had a nice discussion afterwards too. But just the fact that the curriculum doesn't always fit into this nice 1 hour slot once a week. And is there a way that we can be teaching more efficiently and using our time more efficiently? And I think kind of the general consensus was just being flexible with that, and maybe having a couple lessons a week. But there are a lot of ideas thrown out. But Eric, I'm curious about your thoughts and ideas on this, and how it's changed over the years.
Yeah, I wish I could have been there, because I would have loved to have heard all of the discussion, especially with the 3 of you, but as well as from the audience members like Jonathan Oval. It changes every year. And I was at Tennessee Tech for a long time before I came to UNCG. And when I came to UNCG, I still kind of had the same format of curriculum as far as what to do. But the students here is different. There's a different caliber, there's a different intensity. And so I've had to adapt that curriculum. And so as far as referring to the weekly lesson, yeah, that's a tough one. The thing that I've been doing that's worked well for me, at least with the graduate students, I didn't do it this semester, but I did it the last 2 years, is that I do 2-hour lessons with them, but I meet every other week. And that's worked very well, because in 50 minutes, if you're playing a 20-minute piece, there's only so much you can really get done because there's too much to do. So I found that the 2-hour window works, and then I just have to make sure that we keep up with the calendar so they have equal number of lessons. With the undergraduates, I ask the students, try as much as I can if they want to do 2 30-minute lessons or a full 1-hour lesson. And so some of them prefer the 2 30-minute lessons because they're going to focus for 3 days on marimba and then 3 days on timpani or whatever it may be. Some of them prefer that. Some of them would rather not see me until like a whole week, so they've got time to digest everything. So
you let them choose that?
I try to as much as possible. I would say
that's a good idea.
Probably 3 out of 4. That's on their. I send out a Google sheet to get all the information, then ask them preferred lesson time, and then would you rather have 1 or 2 lessons per week. So, and I'm fortunate too. I've got some grad students here that have specialties. My DMA student was a gigging drum set player for a long time, so like he's taking some of the older students to teach drum set.
That's good.
And splitting lessons. But it's always changing, and I'm finding that there's stuff that I've left out because I have to keep learning. I'm still trying to play as much as I can and take as many gigs as I can and whatever, just so I can keep them up to date and make sure that they're on top of it.
Yeah, we talked a lot about that too, and just adjusting for each individual student. And again, there is probably not an ideal curriculum that's going to fit everyone, because everyone's coming from different backgrounds and has different levels, and we have so many instruments and so many fields kind of to work in, that it's I feel like you have to constantly be thinking about it generally, but also then for each individual student, it's a complicated equation.
Yes.
Do you guys ever run into that one instructor that just thinks, no, you have to teach Cerrone? Like, nope, can't be Wilcoxon, has to be Cerrone. Or like isn't that weird? Like, I've never understood that at all. And of course we do. We do a big mix of a lot of the usual suspects: Cerrone, Wilcoxon, Pratt, and De La Cluse. And I think we're not unusual or groundbreaking in that way. But it's always confused me, someone who's like, oh no, can't do Wanamaker, has to be. It's just weird. It's like, wait, there's none of this is like bad. And
No.
even if they hate it, then maybe they should do it. I don't know, like what defines that one of the piece of curriculum is better than another. I don't know.
I think it depends on what you're wanting the students to get out of it, and that's, we do Cerrone. That's first semester, first year. Like, they come in, they do Cerrone, they do Pratt, and then we actually use Bill Bachman's book. It's like Essential Stick Techniques, because we don't have drumline here, and so a lot of those things I used to teach in drumline, I've got to teach in the curriculum now. But we do that, but there are I select certain Cerrone etudes because I know, like, there are things I've got to talk about, style study in that book. And so I think, but if you're more familiar with Peters and you can discuss those same, core points, then use that.
Yeah, exactly. And
Whatever.
I guess that's what I mean. Like, you'd have to really try hard to find a wrong answer. I mean, for the typical student, at least, unless you got some really, really particular student that, is so proficient at a couple of things and just has a very specific hole they need filled. But yeah, I don't know. Yeah, it's an interesting conversation because my opinion's not that strong. It's like, you just need rep. There's the same musical things in all these pieces of rep. You just need some rep.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Definitely.
Anywho, well, anyway, speaking of snare drum, oh, maybe I just gave the hint away. Oh man, I might have just blown it. Let's see.
Oh,
So,
Casey.
it's going to be pretty obvious. This is snare drum, so I don't think that's really going to matter. But
Yeah.
I did prepare a What's the Sound this week. So this is where I prepare a little something and I play it for you, and then you guys tell me what you think you're hearing. So your hint is a variation on two things that you guys already know about.
Nice.
All right, that is it. Any ideas?
Well, it's Delacluse 1.
Bam, look at him go.
Definitely Delacluse 1. That's hip though. What is the
I
second
know.
thing?
Oh
What is
man,
the
but it's
second
not
sound?
just Delacluse 1, it's Delacluse 1 with impeccable timing and perfection. You guys forgot that part. I'm sure one of you would have said that soon. If you heard it again, you would have said that certainly. But yeah, that's just me recording the first 8 bars of Delacluse 1 on my new brass Majestic Prophonic snare drum. So nice plug.
Boom.
We're all about ads. We just ads all day, every
Right.
day on this podcast.
We make so much money too.
Right. A lot of kickback.
Oh, we get such a big kickback. Yeah, so that's something, of course, like Eric said, that's Delacluse 1. And the variation on it, of course, I repeated the same 8 bars, but that sound effect is something called an automated modulator filter. So what it's doing is it's taking the left and right channels of the recording, and it's got a certain timing that it's changing the frequency variation of it, so it sounds all wavy and bouncy. And this particular one I use in my DAW has a bunch of pre-made settings, and they'll vary in speed. And anyway, I just thought that was a fun thing to do. And the other
Cool.
variation that you heard, I said it was 2 variations on things you know. I don't know if you got a look at this microphone, but it should look fairly familiar.
It looks similar to my SM57 microphone, but the angle is kind of funky. What's going on there?
Oh, good. Yes, thank you for segueing me so well. So yeah, this is basically an SM57, but this company called Grinelli Audio Labs has configured it in a L configuration. So it says SM57. It even says Shure on the capsule. So it's the exact same capsule, and I assume they have some agreement with Shure to like remake their microphone basically. But it's in this cool L configuration, which is working great for me on the podcast right now because it just simply fits in my little desk area better. But it's designed to get up on a snare drum, sort of like this. And I'll of course edit in a graphic so you guys can see this correctly. But on a normal microphone configuration, you've got all this space. The mic goes like that, and that gets in the way of your hi-hat, it gets in the way of your other setup. But these microphones are designed to just sneak up over the rim and point down at the instrument. So,
Wow.
yeah, so I
Nice.
thought
Interesting.
that was fun. And yeah, the 2 toys I got I got several toys at PASIC, but I got this new snare drum from Majestic, and then I had waiting for me this microphone at home. So I thought I would just put the 2 together for a little What's the Sound. And I've talked about the Shure SM57 before because we ran into that bogus news report about the president's
Yeah.
new microphone, and how this news report got it so wrong that Donald Trump has insisted on using this brand new microphone that gives him an extra decibel boost and all this nonsense, and it's just not true at all. And I dug around in that story and found that no, the White House has been using the SM57 for many presidencies now. So the special microphone is nothing but a Shure SM57. So a little more about SM57. Let's see. And I hope you agree, like, it does record snare drum really well, and you will see SM57s in live applications and also studio applications to record drums in particular. So just a little something about it. straight from Wikipedia, it says the origin of the SM57 may be traced to 1937 when Shure engineer Ben Bauer developed the first single element directional microphone. This was called the Unidyne, which, if you remember from that last episode, I did already say some of this. So the Unidyne had a cardioid pickup pattern, and in 1959, another Shure engineer named Ernie Seller advanced the art of the microphone design significantly with the Unidyne 3. Seller torture tested the Unidyne 3, meaning he checked its durability. Let's see, during 3 years of research and development, and thereby produced the SM series of rugged and reliable Shure microphone capsules, which is what is on this L-shaped mic configuration. The SM stands for studio microphone. Sealer was an aficionado. This is a funny part. Sealer was an aficionado of classical music and expected the SM57 to be used for orchestras. He, quote, despised rock music, but ironically, the microphone ended up being widely used during amplified concerts and has become an industry standard for snare drums, toms, guitar amps, and other components of rock groups. So,
Did you say torture testing?
Yeah, that's what it says. I think they
Wow.
I think they just mean like dropped it, threw it around. Yeah, I don't
That's
think
an intense phrase.
I know. I think
Right.
that's an intense
Yeah.
phrase. That is what it said. I don't know if that's a standard thing or not, but they just mean that they chucked it around. They put it through humidity. They, put it out in the rain and saw if it would still work. And that is something that in the previous topic I did with this microphone, they said the White House uses it for that reason. They'll bring the mics on tour with the president or traveling or whatever, and they just hold up. They hold up much better than, say, a nice condenser microphone. Yeah. Laurel, I think you are going to talk a little bit Tennessee for us today.
Yeah, so this topic is, especially for me, really out of left field considering what I usually talk about here on the podcast. I'm going to talk about athletics, the NCAA, the cost of athletics, and our relationship to it as students, and then as faculty members of those students, and then as faculty members that have to exist within these environments where athletics feels like it plays such a huge role. But first, I have a question/comment. I know Eric was at Tennessee Tech for quite some time, but are you from Tennessee or near Tennessee?
I am from Tennessee. I grew up just outside of Jackson in the western part of the state.
Okay.
And my bit of trivia I like to tell people is that my first percussion teacher was Julie Hill, actually.
Oh,
So,
Really? Oh, Julie. She's the best.
yeah, she's wonderful.
yeah.
Everybody kind of laughs at that, but yeah, no, I did grow up in Tennessee.
All right. So you
Yep.
can probably, well, not to assume things, but I found growing up in Knoxville, especially, it's really hard to avoid knowing about Tennessee sports, especially football. Like you have to just really try to not know about it. And, it was something in my family, people would donate to the volunteer scholarship fund so you could get tickets, and it was something my family did. If there was a home game on a Saturday, we'd go and get there early so I could see the band, because I liked
Wow.
the band, and so did my cousins. And so it was something that was very much part of my childhood, and it's something that at least my immediate family, my parents, no longer give to, and that's a later part of this discussion. But really, if you're anyone out there and you attend a Div 1 bowl eligible school as a student and you're a music major, your life will be affected by the AD and the practices taken by the university on game day. It just will. There's nothing you can do about it, from having to give up your life every fall in marching band to not being able to get on campus on the weekend if you wanted to.
Right.
To practice because they've sold all the parking spots. And these are just realities that happen. And this came to my mind recently this week because in what has become very typical UT fashion, they just fired their head coach, Butch Jones, which there might be a lot of listeners out there who know a lot more about this than me, but it got me thinking about all of these relationships between being a student and athletics really affecting you even though they shouldn't, and being a teacher and they affect you even though they maybe shouldn't. And I remember when I was a student at UT in 2008, the AD fired longtime coach Philip Fulmer, who was responsible for, at that time, an unmet national championship record in 1998. And he won back-to-back SEC championships in 97 and 98. And ironically, he was fired because, they said he just wasn't doing the job anymore. He's also the last coach to get Tennessee to an SEC championship. In fact, he's the last coach to even get them to an SEC East title. And that was in 2007, the season before he was fired. So he had a $6 million buyout at the time. Yeah. At the time he was fired, $6 million. And I remember there was quite an uproar, and the players were really, really upset. And they were very vocal about it. I don't remember hearing about the buyout or anything. I just thought it wasn't cool how they fired him, like they just did one day. And then he had to go to a press conference less than 48 hours later about it. And of course, with the firing of Butch Jones, this it really jumped to the forefront of my mind, especially knowing that Butch has an $8 million buyout.
Wow.
So,
Jeez.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah.
Buying him out of his contract.
Yeah.
Because he has a contract for a certain amount of time.
Yeah. And so there's typically the longer, like whatever contract is negotiated when a coach or anyone is hired, the longer they work there, the buyout gets smaller and smaller and smaller because the contract's more filled. And his is an $8 million buyout. And so if you do the math of how that's going to work for the period of years that UT will be buying him out, he will make nearly $250,000 a month to not do a job.
And he probably will have another job in the meantime.
Right. And if that happens, part of his hiring will be probably for the new school to partially buy him out. And it's like this wild thing. And anyway, reading about it can just really make your skin crawl. At least it did me. But so $8 million there, $6 million to Phil Fulmer. Before they hired Butch Jones, a guy named Eric Willie, who was the savior before Butch Jones, because there's this huge savior complex among Vol fans. At least once you're like removed from them a little bit, they get a little creepy spooky about how much they put faith in people about something like football. But Derek Dooley was, hired and then fired and bought out for $5 million in 2012. Before him, a recently fired Oakland Raiders coach, Lane Kiffin, coached just 1 year and then left after being offered the job at USC, a position he was later fired from while in his third season. And he actually now coaches at Florida Atlantic University, which Casey and Megan know is where Ben used to teach. I would have been interested to know if he knew anything about Lane, but anyway, yeah. I don't know. Do you remember that, Eric? The burning mattresses when Kiffin left? And
yeah, Kiffin was kind of a hot topic for everybody in the state. And but fortunately for me, I haven't been a UT fan. And so I don't watch football that much either. So it was like, okay, I'll wait until University of Kentucky basketball starts and I'll be okay. But
yeah.
there was a huge, and I do remember that. But Lane Kiffin seemed like he was going down the tubes as soon as he walked on campus. I don't know, but
yeah, that was a period. I was living in Boston during that time and in grad school, so I was pretty far removed and enjoying not watching and having a little distance from all of it. But I remember reading students rioted and they started fires on campus and they carried this flaming mattress through the street and blocked the exits from, oh my God, it was just ridiculous. So anyway, you guys, if you add up all that together, that's nearly $20 million in 9 years in buyouts for the university.
excuse me.
Amidst all of that, Tennessee just announced a $340 million renovation to Neyland Stadium.
Wow.
Because when things don't work, that's what we do. But if anything else on campus doesn't work, you just have to deal with it. And I'll promise I'll get to how this relates to students and faculty. it's really so surprising to read about this, because to me these are all really big money numbers, and I know to people who are in administrations they probably aren't, because you deal with numbers like this all the time and your budget's probably huge. But it got me wondering how many ADs actually make money, and the answer to that is 24 out of 130 FBS schools make money.
Okay.
So 24 out of the 130 bowl game eligible schools. And Tennessee is one of those. So the recent Jones buyout is totally absorbable by the AD. And that surprised me, and I was relieved at the same time.
So just to be clear, you said 24 out of 130, right?
Of the bowl eligible schools alone.
Actually make money on their athletic department.
Yeah.
Right.
Wow.
Yeah. And this is according to the NCAA finances that are released every year. So this is based on the 2015-16 finances.
So I think that's just important to clarify, because everyone, it's often just assumed, oh yeah, it's like huge money for the university, but more often than not, in this case, it's about 1/5 of them is actually making money from it. So people are, four out of five are losing money on it.
Right. Yeah, and
I bet the amount of loss for those schools that are making losses is probably pretty drastic. And I bet the schools that are on the fringe, I'm totally suspecting, but I bet the schools that are on the fringe that are like trying to get to that point where they're making money are probably losing a lot of money.
Yeah.
tens of millions. Yeah. Yeah,
I think that school might be one of those.
they're losing quite a bit. You may not be surprised to know that according to this data, 6 of the top 10 revenue schools are from the SEC. Number one was Texas A&M. They brought in $194.5 million of their AD. Their expenses are nearly $137 million. So that comes out to roughly like $60 million afterwards. That's a super rough number. I'm sure there are allotments and things that that's distributed among. But yeah, you bring in almost $1 billion. No, almost $200 million, and your profit's $60 million. This is they're number one. They have the highest revenue. Let's see, Tennessee's number 9 at 140.5 in revenue, but they spend 128 to get it. So
Where's Missouri? Do you see Missouri on that list?
Yes, I do, because I was looking at all the SEC schools. Missouri is number 30 on the list. They bring in 97 million, but they spend 94.
Yeah,
Wow.
sounds about right.
Yeah, and that's really in terms of the spread of those who make money, it's about there. It's probably between 5 and 10 million. And then, you start to look at the losses and you're like, ooh. Here's one school in the Pac-12 that loses 20 million. At least they did that one year. So it's quite an investment, and it makes you start, because some of that has to be from private donors, and some of it's ticket sales, some of it's merchandise and branding and marketing, and some of it is subsidized by a state or by the school. That's just how it works. So I found another article that says the median FBS school spends $14.7 million to help subsidize its athletics departments in 2014, and that's up from $11 million just the year before. That level of spending isn't unique to FBS only. In fact, median football championship subdivisions and non-football schools spent roughly $11 million in 2014 to help fund their athletics. And according to the NCAA chief financial officer, Kathleen McNeely, she says there is still a misconception that most schools generate money or are generating more money than they spend. And these data show once again that the truth is the opposite. It becomes a very interesting thing, and especially as someone who, on Facebook, I'm still connected to a lot of people who are like armchair quarterbacks for Tennessee sports, and to just like hear how much everybody says, and they have all these opinions on, you need to fire them, and like, dude, they're already I mean, $20 million in buyouts of the head coaches alone. That's not the supporting staff. By the time you add the supporting staff, who knows how bad it gets, because that was this entire other level of research that I just did not have time to do this week. You get to wondering the relationship between that and budgets for other areas of the academics of the school. And, you know, as someone in higher ed, just like you guys, part of me is very sad that the thing that gets recognized is athletics and not achievements by students on a regular basis, you know. Like I remember getting my packet to go to UT, and they tried really hard to be like, astronauts went here, we promise. You know, to like really focus, like we are not just an athlete school, we are a level 1 research university, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
However, you will find that those labs are not quite up to date, and the oldest buildings on campus haven't been renovated, and that's where the engineers are, and da, 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 da. Though the athletes got a new dorm and a new cafeteria and a new practice facility all in the time I was there. You know, so it's, you just kind of start to wonder how much those two things start to correlate. And of course, as teachers, and especially as percussion educators, it's so hard to avoid knowing about marching band activities, you know, or hearing about them, or students complaining about them, because our guys either have to be in it for their degree requirements, or they elect to be part of it.
Right.
And a study was released in April of this year in something called Sage Open Journal. It's called The Time Usage of College Music Majors, Non-Music Majors, and Marching Band Participants. And this study is hilarious because it basically tells us things that we all already know. But it's kind of, it's nice to see it quantized in this way and not just listed by anecdotal evidence. And you'd be surprised by none of the results, especially that of the activities they looked at. So they had 4 broad categories when they surveyed students for this study. The study was done at a large SEC school, but they don't say which one. The 4 categories are academics, eating, sleeping, and then other. So that would be like leisure, work, whatever, in those categories. Academics, the music students, period, are involved far more in their academics. They sleep less, and then they also have far less leisure time. If you break those down into smaller topics, marching band music majors sleep less than anyone. They have time to study and do homework less than anyone. They have the least amount of time for leisure. And these are things that I wouldn't imagine any of us are surprised by. And I know, Megan, you're at Mizzou, and I like, does any of this, like, do you ever feel the effects of your AD or your students?
Oh,
Anything
definitely. Definitely. I mean, it's quite different from, just the amount of time that you spend in marching band is quite different than, I went to a small liberal arts college, and so I probably spent the same, I don't know, it's interesting, because I probably spent the same amount of time doing marching band in undergrad over 4, I did it for 4 years, because, and I wasn't a music ed major, but if the percussionist didn't do the marching band, there was no one to do it because it's a smaller school, right? And so we just, I don't know, this is like what everyone did. And so I did 4 years of marching band, and then looking at the amount of time, looking at the amount of marching, the amount of time it takes at Mizzou, it's more per season, but none of the music majors do it for 4 years. I mean, that's very rare. Usually they do it for 1 or 2 years. I would say 2 years is average for music ed major. And yeah, I mean, I definitely, I kind of tout that as a recruiting tool of like, you know, we're this big SEC school, and so, you know, you get to go to bowl games and travel with the team and blah, 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 whatever. And it's an incredible amount of time, but I think for a lot of students, that's a big social activity for them. And so, you know, I'm looking at this chart right now, and yeah, I said what to the eating thing, but, you know, after we had that brief conversation about it, it's like, yeah, they eat together. It is a social activity in a nice way to kind of assimilate them into college, and, you know, have a kind of built-in social scene right away. But I don't know, the money thing is incredibly frustrating to me, and I'm with you on everything that you were saying before, Laurel. And my dad teaches at a small private school, and he's actually the faculty, what's it called? Faculty athletics representative. So I talk to him about this a lot because he's very involved in the athletics program. Yeah, he's a huge supporter of the arts, and his professional area is marketing. And so he really considers both arts and sports, and we have a lot of interesting conversations about that. But the amount of money that's spent on these programs is crazy. And one other thing that you didn't mention, I think, is also the recruiting aspect of, if the football team or the sports teams are doing well, it's better for the school. So with that being said, I mean, it is important for the teams to do well and for them to spend money on that, so that recruiting is better, I guess. But it's hard to look at those numbers and to be in some like facilities that we're in. When we're fortunate to be getting a new school of music building in a year and a half, but what we're in now is just unacceptable. And it's been like that for years. And so it's hard to see those numbers and be okay with that.
I know. Do you get a lot of this at Greensboro, Eric?
We're fortunate and unfortunate. We don't have football or marching band here. So we do have a pep band that's primarily consists of non-music majors. But at Tennessee Tech, we had that when I was there, and then I arranged and taught for several universities before I got that job. And yeah, it's a huge time commitment, incredibly huge in the fall. And if you're the professor, like when I was in Cookeville at Tennessee Tech, like I was in charge of the drum line, and then you get offended because your load credit hours, like I would get 1 load credit hour for doing that, and they said, well, 40 hours of work equals 1 load credit hour. And I was like, okay, well, I'm done by the end of band camp. I'll see you later.
Yeah.
And
right.
So then how do you fight those things? Yeah, and in that instance, that drumline was also a big recruiting tool for me. So it had to be at a certain standard, and so I wanted to be involved. And people that aren't involved with the arts or anything, they're going to give money to those areas. You're going to see a new billboard, or you're going to see a new scoreboard that's going to be donated by somebody because they want to see their name, that everybody can see their name every weekend at a game. So you're always going to draw in larger donors. And I think that AD connection, the athletic director connection with the director of the marching band and the communications there's got to be a strong bloodline there, for that to succeed.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right about that.
Well, I wonder if the study. Oh, sorry, Laurel.
Oh, no, I was just going to say it feels so double-edged because it is such a draw for a young person, like a 17-year-old. Yeah, but then you don't have to be much older than that to see the shadow side of it,
Right.
Yeah. Anyway, sorry, Casey, what were you going to say?
Oh, I was going to say I certainly agree with Eric and Megan that it can be a huge benefit to us because young people see the band, they go, oh, I want to play in the band, and then they get more into music and they decide, oh, that's the one thing I'm really interested in. And someone else on the drum line talks about the professor. Oh, I like my professor, Casey and Laurel. And then they come and they're studying with you, and then they're in percussion ensemble. And yeah, certainly a huge asset as far as just having music majors. Certainly it can really help a lot. I think maybe the study that Laurel's presenting, it maybe just reflects the big change in what higher ed kind of is. It's maybe it's about the college experience more than it's about I'm going here to learn my major, So
Yep.
if a successful athletic department and a successful team is what's attracting a science major or an engineer, I don't know. That says something about what what this is supposed to be about, or what
Right.
I always thought it was supposed to be about. I don't know. That's probably all I have to say about it. But also, yeah, it makes perfect sense. Okay, we have to spend all this money on athletics, and hopefully we at least break even. That way, we're a big student draw. We don't lose too much money, and then we attract big donations. So,
But I have to say
Eh,
one story really quick that I've always told everybody when I was teaching, when I was in my master's, and I was teaching we would start out and the drum line would be 10 snares, 5 tenors, 8 bass drums, and we would start out with like 17 cymbal players.
Oh my God.
And my first year there, the football team was quickly losing, like terrible. And so second week there were 13 cymbal players. Third week there were like 10. By the end of the season, I think there were 6. And so those guys were in marching band just so they could get into the football game. Yeah, but as
Wow.
the team got worse,
yeah, certainly, certainly.
it was worth it to them to spend all that time rather than just buy a ticket.
That is
Right.
a lot of work. Wow.
Yeah. Well, and it's fun. It is fun. So, yeah, great. If it's a skill you
Yeah.
have and put to use.
We did have a saying of like, dude, if you get on cymbals, it's fine. You're still on the bus. Like you still get to go to the trip if you're interested, and you're still on the bus, man. Except you don't get yelled at near as much. So is it that bad? Not really.
Well, I
Yeah.
think let's get back to Eric a little bit here. We do have some questions from Ben Charles. He didn't join us today, but he did his homework like a good co-host and left us some questions, so he's at least contributing, which is pretty rad. So, Ben would like to ask Eric, could you please tell us about the collaborative process working with John Mackey on his percussion concerto drum music?
Oh, yeah, it's a great piece. It turned out very well. The story with that piece is I was again at Tennessee Tech, and the director of the bands at the time was also president of ABA, a man named Joe Herman, and he and I got along very well, collaborated. And I was looking for a new concerto to play. And there are some concertos that I'm a fan of, but they're very small in number. And so I was looking, I can't remember what John had written at the time, but I just walked over to him. We ate lunch together, and I said, hey, would you be interested in commissioning John to write a piece for solo percussion in one ensemble? And he turned to the right, typed the email, sent it to John, and like started talking, and like ding, John Mackey wrote back and was like, definitely interested, let's talk. And the teaching assistant at the time was very nice and sent out all the emails to get the consortium together. And that's how that went. And then it was a long time after that before we talked again, almost 2 years, because he was busy with other works. And originally when he started writing, I believe he had started with a snare drum solo, because he knew I was doing drum corps and all that. And so he had started something with that, and then he changed. And he was still working on it, and we had set a premiere date in October, and I got the first movement about 6 weeks before the premiere, which was the first movement, the marimba pie movement. As far as collaboration on it, the only thing that he would send me stuff, and I gave him some ideas, but most of it he had mapped out already. So some of the stick clicks and the sizzle sound for the cymbal in the first movement was there, and I changed some of the things in the third movement just as far as orchestration of the tom parts. But it was really all John, and the only thing that was really unique, and you'll see that on his blog post, was he didn't realize that he had written the vibe bowing to happen in between the mallets. Yeah, and when he came to school, I was like, man, this is a neat little trick that you put in here. And because on the music he had the vibe score and he had the bowing part in 2 different staves, and so he hadn't realized that he had crossed, and so you're like bowing the E in between octave Bs.
Yeah, sure. Well, Ben
So
actually asked something specific about the bowing. He asked if it was partially inspired by Christopher Dean's exploration of the same technique.
and John never mentioned that.
Uh-huh.
All of the bowing parts are doubled, usually with the horn players, and so it really helps the initial attack of that kind of brassy sound.
Okay. Sure. So, you mentioned that you gave him some ideas, and I know you've worked with other composers in the past, and I guess this question could be for anyone. When a composer usually wants some ideas, what types of things do you guys find you're usually telling them about? Is it like special sound effects? Is it, hey, if you put a cymbal on a timpani and roll on it, it sounds really neat? Or is like I always feel like when we give them ideas, it's always just telling them about special sounds they might not already know. Is that right, or is there other things you often talk with them about?
Um, I end up telling them to write it, and if they don't have a sound in their head, send it to me, and then I'll figure it out.
Uh-huh.
And let my being the interpreter help finalize the piece.
Okay.
But I try to stay away from like giving them too much information, because I don't want to write the piece for them, or like think that, you know, it needs to be dictated a certain way. I want them to, whatever's in their head, to come out.
Yeah, sure. Great. Hey, well, Eric, I guess last little question to finish up. Is there anything coming up for you that's exciting, or anything coming out that we could plug for you on the show?
Actually, there's not. This fall has been probably the busiest I've been as far as performing and teaching. And actually, I'm moving tomorrow, so that's my big, big
Tomorrow.
plug. Yeah, but no, normal things in the spring. I'm getting to go out and hang out with Eric Hollenbeck for a weekend. I'm looking forward to that.
Yes.
And going to the Kentucky Day of Percussion and the Western Kentucky Day of Percussion. So I'll get be busy in the spring, but get to see a lot of friends and get to see a lot of great players in those areas. So that's kind of it right now. Yeah, fortunately.
That's a blast. Awesome. Hey, well, you guys, I think that'll do it for episode 121. Thanks so much, Megan and Laurel and Eric Willie. It's great to chat with you again, man.
Thank you, guys. Thanks for having me on here.